Good morning, everyone. So my name's Stuart Price. I'm a partner and actuary at Quantum Advisory. And with me this morning is my colleague, Chris Serene, who's also a partner at Quantum Advisory and heads up our IT department. So this morning, we're going to go through, I'm going to really highlight as a nation why we're not saving enough for a comfortable retirement and what we can do about it. And Chris then really will touch upon what we can do about it when the issues around that is something called the pensions dashboard. And Chris will enlighten you about what it is, how it's going to work, and when it's going to come out, etc., etc. So firstly, looking at the pensions and the ticking time bomb. So as I say, I think, as a nation, we've got an issue in relation to saving for retirement. So, of course, the first key question is, how much income do we need in retirement when we come to retire? And this slide here shows a survey done by Fidelity, and they said that most people will need to replace between 55 and 85% of their pre-retirement income to ensure that they can maintain their lifestyle in retirement. So where does that 55 to 85% come from? Well, it's broadly made up of the old defined benefit schemes when you used to be in those schemes and you'd build up a 60th every year in the schemes. If you built up 40 years service in these schemes, that'll give you 40/60th of your salary or 2/3 of your salary. And then you add on the state pension, and that would broadly take you to the 85%, which Fidelity are talking about in their paper they produced a few years ago. But straight away, there's a few red flags on the right-hand side, really. First of all, the decline of defined benefit pension schemes, which we'll come on to in a short while. It's having a long-term impact on retirement savings in the UK. And also the state pension. It provides a basic level, but it's got a few issues. Is it sustainable in its current form? And again, we'll touch upon that as well. And then if you go to the left-hand side of the slide, then really, again, a key stat produced by the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association, or the PLSA, as they're known, is around about 80% of people do not know how much they need in retirement. So if you don't know how much you need in retirement, then how on earth are you going to know how much you're going to save for retirement? And again, we'll try and touch upon this, when we go through this session. So first of all, I thought it'd be useful to sort of look at what sort of income is needed in retirement. And again, this is some analysis carried out by the PLSA. They did it, I think it was last year, and they've updated it recently. So these are the updated numbers. And again, there's quite a lot to take in this slide. But first of all, to set the scene, it assumes that retirement age is 67, and it assumes that a person has a full national insurance record. So it assumes that they're receiving the full state pension, which is currently around about £11,500 a year. And it assumes that they've paid off their mortgage. They're sort of a homeowner, not paying any rent, and have got no mortgage payments. And obviously, a lot of people in the UK, that doesn't apply to them. Obviously, they are in rented accommodation, they're paying rent, so the situation for them will be even more stark than this slide shows here. On the left-hand side, you've got living standard. And so what they've done is they put people into minimum, moderate, or comfortable in retirement. And you can see for minimum, you're talking about you've got £50 a week for food, you've got no car, you can maybe go away on a short break to the UK once a year, etc., and some money for clothing and footwear and things like that. And you see it as you progress down to moderate and comfortable, things are looking a bit better, and you get a better lifestyle in retirement. Then you've got single person and couple on this slide. So this is showing the annual income needed in retirement. So for a single person to receive the minimum living standard, they need an annual income now currently around about £14,500. If you're a couple, that joint income is around about £22,500. Then you can see, then you go to the moderate and comfortable, the amounts needed by the single person or the couple then increase over those different standards. And then really the start number then is looking at the right-hand side, looking at where the PLSA have put the percent of the population, and they're saying the majority of the population currently in the UK would fit into the minimum area of living standard, just really having enough to have a decent level in retirement, but nowhere near comfortable. And again, as I said as well, then this assumes that people have a homeowner and have paid off their mortgage and not paying any rent. Again, for some people, the situation could be a lot stark. And then if we look at the quote then for the people's pension here, what they're saying is at the bottom of the slide, again, which is quite frightening. Almost half of the people in the UK believe they will still be working when they reach state pension age, and 7% believe they'll never be able to retire. And we expect those numbers will go up over and over time unless things are done. So this gives you a feel for the incomes needed in retirement. Now, people get the state pension. So if you get the full state pension, I suppose the question is then, what sort of income do you need then from your private savings? And what this slide here just shows you the amount needed to save up in defined contribution pots at age 67. So for the minimum standard to get that £14,500 a year, you get £11,500 from the state pension. So you need to make up a shortfall around about £3,500 or £3,000 income. So what you would need at retirement, age 67, is a defined contribution pot of around about £56,000. If you're a couple, then if you add on both getting into the state pension, then again, you've got enough there. You don't need anything else just in relation to your private provision. But then what you can see then, looking at the moderate and comfortable, you can see the numbers then go up by a huge amount. So if you're on a moderate lifestyle in retirement, you're a single person, you would need around about £400,000 saved, or if you're a couple, £200,000 each. And then for the comfortable, you can see for an individual, 600,000, or for a couple, each couple would need around about £350,000. You can see the amount of saving you need to make sure you go into those higher tranches, so those higher sort of standards are quite big, really. And again, a quote we've got from Phoenix Group. Again, they're saying that 28% of people in Wales aged over 55 feel they won't have enough money to live in retirement. You know, that's a higher proportion than the UK average, 25%. And again, maybe to be expected given the demographics of Wales and, you know, and the population and you know, etc. But again, quite stark really, over a quarter of people feel they won't have enough money to live in retirement. Again, so what can we do, you know, as a nation to help that? Well, there are quite a few things we can do to save for retirement. So we've talked about the state pension, but then you can save privately, either via your employer or personal, by defined benefit, defined contribution, or something called collective defined contribution schemes, or CDC. There are a new arrangement coming into place. People can save via ISAs, but property is quite an interesting one. Obviously, if you've got, you know, two properties, so if you're quite well off, you've got two properties, then you can use the income from that second property to provide you with your income in retirement. But actually, I was looking into this, and I saw some statistics, again, which I think is quite interesting last week. And the net housing wealth in the UK is around about £7.1 trillion. It's actually bigger than the amount we got saved under the pension regime. So people have got more money saved in their property than they have within their pensions. And of that £7.1 trillion, 2.6 trillion of it is associated to people over the age of 65 and above. And those over the age of 50 have around about 78% of the property wealth within the UK. So what that really is telling us is that, you know, people maybe over the age of 50 can perhaps, you know, rely on their properties when they come to retire. They haven't got enough. Maybe they can downsize, do some form of equity release to give them more income at retirement if they haven't saved enough. But again, it does show you, though, the stark difference between the older population and the younger population. The younger population aren't on the house ladder. If they do, they get on there a lot later. So perhaps, you know, the younger generation will be relying on the older generation to help them out in relation to pension saving or getting on that property ladder, which maybe then can be used for a property at some points in the future. Now, I quickly want to just touch on the state pension. So the state pension, as you can see, gives everyone a basic amount of income at retirement. And the way the state pension works on the left-hand side is something called a pay-as-you-go scheme. So the way the scheme works is we currently pay national insurance or taxes as we work, and that is used to pay those who are currently in receipt of the state pension. Now, what you're finding in the UK and other Western developed nations is the workers to pensions ratio is diminishing. So since 2000 until now, the number of people receiving state pension has increased by 40%. And from now into 2050, it's expected to increase by a further 40%. So what we're seeing are the big issue of the aging population within the UK is there are going to be more and more of us in retirement and less of us working to actually fund the state pension for us. So what are we going to do to actually sort of make sure that the state pension remains sustainable? Well, as we've been seeing, you know, recently, you know, the state pension age has been increasing. It's currently 67, going up to 68. Will that have to be increased even further to maybe 1770, 71, 72? And what about, you know, the amount of state pension? Will that have to be reduced as well below the current levels? Well, again, if you make changes to state pension age or the amount of pension being paid, then the biggest impact it's going to have really is on the lower paid. The lower paid actually rely on the state pension the most. So by increasing state pension age or reducing the amount, you're going to have the biggest impact on that cohort of people. And as we'll see, you know, they're the people really that we need to be thinking about in relation to pension provision. So really, I really only see one solution. Maybe, you know, the solution is an increase to taxes to actually fund the state pension to keep it sustainable. But as you can see from the top corner of this slide here, you know, it's already a big expense for the government. It's around about 5% of GDP, which is around about half the cost to fund the NHS. And that cost is only going to go up and up and up. So it's already a big cost, a big burden to the government. And again, it's only going to increase, I think, really over time. Now, with our state pension in the UK, though, it provides 22% of average earnings. Remember that first slide I said we need between 55 and 85. So again, it's not even getting us halfway. Now, if you go to other European countries, maybe somewhere like France, the average earnings is a lot higher. So there's a lot more being paid for the state pension compared to the UK. So what it's telling me for the UK is that, you know, as a nation, okay, we've got the state pension there as a safety net, but we do have to save privately to ensure that we can have a decent level of income in retirement. So what can we do to help save our pension, you know, privately? And so you've got the private sector, and in the private sector, we had the defined benefit schemes, you know, the old gold standard, the old final salary schemes, whereby, you know, when you came to retire, your pension was based on your service and your salary. It gives you a guaranteed income paid monthly, increasing generally each year in line with inflation, and it's paid you till you die. And then when you die, then that's passed on to your dependents, your spouse or your partner. They get some of that income until they die as well. So really, for individuals, it's the best type of pension you can get in the UK. Now, the Purple Book is a survey produced by the Pensions Protection Fund. It's done every year, been produced since 2007. And what I've got here is statistics from 2007. It was first introduced to 2023, where we are now. And there are two big numbers I want to highlight, really. The first one is the number of defined benefit schemes within the private sector in the UK has gone down from 7,500 to around about 5,000 now. You know, employers have been closing these schemes down due to the costs and the risks of running them, especially in the low interest rate environment we've had, you know, since 2008, 2009. Things have changed now, but for, you know, the last 15 years or so, it's been very much a low interest rate environment, which has made these schemes very, very costly to run. But the big number, I think, is the number at the bottom, members still accruing benefits. So back in 2007, around about 2.7 million people were in these defined benefit schemes, actively paying money in and building up more and more defined benefits, building up this good guaranteed income. That has now reduced to around about 700,000 in the private sector, and it's gradually declining over time. But it's not the case in the public sector. In the public sector, we have a different situation, and there's around about 6 million people accruing defined benefits within the public sector. So very much different between the private and public sector. And this is sort of brought out by this slide produced, or this graph produced by the ONS. It's showing numbers at 2012 and 2021, split between public sector, private sector, and all employees, looking at whether they're in a defined benefit scheme, a defined contribution scheme, or no pension scheme at all. And again, it highlights the fact, you look at the dark blue lines is defined benefit schemes. You can see in the public sector, huge proportion in defined benefit, and it's actually increased over the last 8 years. And so there's a big difference between that and the private sector, where you can see the dark blue on the right-hand side there, it's very, very small. But there is some good news there. If you look at all employees, the sort of bottom two rows or two columns there, and if you look at that light reddish or pink color, that shows a number of people who weren't in an occupational pension scheme with their employer. So you can see back in 2012, it was around about 55%. Well, now back in 2021, that's reduced to around about 20%. So, you know, why is that? You know, why are there more people now in occupational pension schemes, albeit defined contribution schemes, which obviously have more risk associated with it for employees? But why is that? Why is the difference? Well, for those of you who know your pensions, in 2012, something called auto-enrollment was introduced. And auto-enrollment meant that, you know, if you had an employee who was earning more than £10,000 per annum, who was aged 22 or over and under the state pension age, then they would be automatically put into their employer's pension scheme, and the minimum rates would be the employer would put in 3% and the employee would put in 5%, so 8% going in. It was a good start, a good way to get people starting to save for their pension privately, and to make them think about what they were doing. And the idea being that every 5 years we were going to have reviews and maybe look at improving about what we had in place. Now, the first review was carried out in 2017, and the main points that came out of that one were that going forward, contributions will be based on the first pound of earnings rather than the lower earnings limit threshold of 6,240, which is currently in place. So if you use the auto enrollment legislation, then only earnings after that amount do people start paying contributions on. And also, they were going to reduce the age that people were auto-enrolled from 22 to age 18. Now, it's taken 6 years to get this through Parliament, and it was only done in the end by a private member's bill. And so it's had royal assent, but it still hasn't been turned into legislation. So we're hopeful that, you know, when the new Parliament sits in the autumn and the new government's in place, whoever they may be, that obviously this will then be turned into legislation. And what it will mean, it will benefit over 3 million workers, especially lower earners, with 500,000 18 to 21-year-olds saving for the very, very first time for their pension, which is really key because all these individuals will be most probably in defined contribution schemes. And with these schemes is then the younger you start, the bigger impact you can have from the compound interest nature you get for investment returns. So it's very important that younger people start saving earlier than they currently do. And this next slide here really just sort of goes on to reinforce what I've been saying about, you know, auto enrollment has worked to a degree. So that green line at the top there is just showing you that any pension, you can see the stark increase from 2012 onwards to where we are now. But it's not enough, you know. So currently under the auto enrollment regime, the lower paid aren't auto enrolled. If you earn more than £10,000, so it's missing the lower paid. And also those who are self-employed or, you know, gig economy employees, again, they're not included in auto enrollment, and they're people really we should be targeting, making sure they're saving for their retirement. But for me, though, the key thing I think is the amount of money we've got going into auto enrollment pension schemes. You know, 8% in total contribution. You know, 3 from the employer, 5 from the employee. That is nowhere near enough. And you know, when you used to talk to the pension industry, see commentators, etc., they talk about this magic 12%, which we really, as a nation, we should be targeting and maybe introducing it over the next 10 years, you know, and you could do that and maybe ultimately have a split of 6 for the employee, 6 from the employer, or maybe 5 from the employee, 7 from the employer. I don't know, but some sort of rate. But 12% is this rate that people are targeting. And people like the Living Wage Foundation, who now have the Living Pension accreditation, have said that 12% is a rate also that as a nation we should be aiming for. But again, it's going to take a very brave government to come along and do that. But again, you know, as a nation, I think it's something that we really, really do need to do. So what else can we do in relation to helping, you know, solve this pension crisis we have? Well, we can help improve, you know, the financial understanding of individuals. You know, people who have joined auto enrollment schemes, paying their 5, employer paying their 3, 8% going in, may think they're fine and safe, and they're all going to be, you know, it's going to be fine when they come to reach retirement. Well, you know, that's not going to be the case for a lot of individuals. And so we need to make sure that people are aware of this and they can make informed decisions. So how can we do this? Well, maybe we have, you know, financial education in schools, which is then carried on into coming into employment, supported by their employers and other organisations. But for no doubt, I think, you know, the pensions dashboards that Chris is going to come on to a little bit later really will highlight this to individuals. They will hopefully see that actually we're not saving enough, and maybe force a lot of people to make positive action and actually start saving more for their retirement. Because as you can see from some quotes here, around a fifth of workers of which started they plan their retirement savings earlier. Again, goes back to that point I said with defined contribution schemes. The earlier you start saving, the bigger benefit you get from the compound interest nature of investment returns. And then maybe for us, you know, in the pension industry and also maybe government as well, you know, a quote from Aviva is that more people know about the offside rules for football than the rules around retirement, which is silly. You know, pensions should be trying to be made a lot more simpler so people can understand and have faith, and you know, in the pension system, understand what's going on to make sure that, you know, they're happy putting more money in, knowing that, you know, it's going to be a good return for them and they're going to get a good deal at retirement. And now myself, you know, pensions, you know, it's a good news story. You know, I go across and speak to lots of employers and speak to their employees. And it's a good news story. You know, you need to talk about the fact that you get automatic tax relief on your contributions and on most of the investment income that you get. And then when you take the money out of the pension scheme, a quarter of it's tax-free. You know, it really is a tax-efficient way to save. And there's also potential to get relief, national insurance relief, on the contributions that you pay in as well. And by being in an employer's workplace pension scheme, you get a contribution from the employer. So it's like free money for employees, again, making sure they understand that. And there's lots of flexibilities around when you can retire and what you can do at retirement. The only real drawback, I think, for pensions is something, the fact that in good health they can only be accessed at age 55, which is increasing to age 57 from 2028. So maybe people don't want to put money in their pension because maybe they feel that's going to be locked away. So things like sidecar savings here can help, whereby an employee puts money into their pension, but also puts it into a sidecar saving arrangement as well. And once that reaches a certain limit, then more goes to their pension, and they can use that sidecar savings vehicle for maybe a rainy day pot if they need something done to their house or their car or something like that, really, again. And that really gives individuals more flexibility as well around their pension arrangements. There are already some other good things in place as well, or about to be. So you've got something called the Midlife MOT website. It's aimed at 40 to 50-year-olds, help them plan for later life, and there's lots of good financial education tools on there. You've also got something called the Pensions Advice Allowance. So that allows individuals who want to take independent financial advice the ability to use up to £500 each time of their pot of money, the time contribution fund, to actually help pay for that advice. There may be the most popular and the most one that most people are aware of, something called Pensions Wise, which runs by the Pensions Advisory Money Service. And that one really helps people approaching retirement. It gives them guidance and information in relation to what options they have when they come to retire, to make sure they make sure they make the right decisions that are right for them at that right point in time. But I do think, again, a big game changer is going to be the Pensions Dashboard Programme. And again, I won't steal Chris's thunder, and Chris will come on to that in a moment. So how can we increase the amount we save at retirement? Well, we've talked about making employees aware more as a result of education awareness sessions. It's something we can do, but obviously we can't force people's hand to do that. We can just make them aware, and hopefully they'll make some sort of informed decision which is right for them. Defined contribution arrangements, where the majority of people have their private savings now. How can basically the amount of money you get at retirement depends upon what you put in and how those funds investments perform between now and you to retire. So how can you get better investment returns from these funds? Well, the Mansion House reforms announced by the Chancellor, which the Labour has sort of endorsed in their manifesto as well, is looking at defined contribution schemes being able to invest in a bigger, wider range of assets that can give maybe a bigger return. Also, things like collective defined contribution arrangements, whereby you pull lots of arrangements together, maybe the economies of scale there, you can actually get better outcome for members. And what about lower member charges as well? Because pension providers sort of have a charge on members' funds. If they're reduced, it means members have more money at retirement. So something around that, can we maybe reduce those charges even lower to what they currently are? Then if you look at the right-hand side, though, I think these are two real big game changers. Is why don't we have higher tax relief on employee pension contributions for lower earners? So what do I mean by that? Well, currently, if you're a lower tax rate payer, you get 20% tax relief on your contributions. If you're a 40% tax rate payer, you get 40% tax relief. But it's those lower earner people we need to be sort of aiming at. So why don't we have like a 30% flat rate relief for everyone? So that means the lower earners will benefit more and have more going towards their pension provision. But I do really think that the key one really is the increase in auto enrollment rates, because the 8% is a good start, but nowhere near enough. And I do feel that the government has to legislate and do something around that after carrying out maybe some formal consultation and reviews, and increase that rate from 8 to 12%, because relying on individuals to do stuff isn't really enough. You look at that quote there from Money Age, you can see those people earning £50,000 per annum or more actually increase their contributions more than the overall proportion of those who earn below that amount. And it's those lower earners we want to be increasing contributions. I appreciate there's an affordability issue as well, but again, with education and awareness, hopefully we can do something to turn that around. So finally, some thoughts and some key takeaways. Is the state pension sustainable in its current form? Well, it's got some issues, but it's there as a safety net. It provides a decent level for people in retirement to make sure they can have a certain standard of living in retirement. But again, is it sustainable in its current form? I think the only way around it is to increase taxes and increase the funding towards it. We've got a big divide between the private and public sector. It's getting bigger, but a lot of public sector schemes are unfunded. They've got the same issues as a state pension, really. So again, I expect things to happen around the public sector's regime over the coming years. But for sure, though, not enough people saving into defined contribution arrangements. So what can we do about it? Auto enrollment's been good. Let's expand on it and really let's legislate and make sure that 8% goes up to 12%. And in the meantime, try maybe financial education and awareness so people are aware of the situation and where they stand. Because if we don't do something, again, it's a source from independent age, but currently there's around about 2 million people over the age of 65 in the UK who are below the poverty limit, with another 1 million very, very close to it. So again, if we don't do something, those numbers are going to increase immensely. And again, I'll go back to really my first point, really, is the fact that 77% of people don't know how much they need in retirement. If you don't know how much you need in retirement, then how on earth are you going to know how much to save? And that's where hopefully, Chris and the pensions dashboard he's going to go through now will help us to get there, or to get some way there, in relation to maybe solving this pension crisis that we have. So what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Chris and he'll go through the pensions dashboard, and then we're happy to take questions on both sessions at the end. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, it's really interesting. Auto enrollment back in 2012 was probably one of the biggest shake-ups to pensions in my lifetime. I think the dashboard potentially has the ability to do that. So I'm going to talk to you now on the next slide. We're going to look at what is the pensions dashboard and when is it actually going to happen, and how this is going to impact you both as you potential users of the dashboard, as employers, and also pension schemes. So what is the pensions dashboard? The pensions dashboard will supposedly enable individuals to access their pension information online, securely and all in one place, thereby supporting better planning for retirement and growing financial well-being. So that's a quote from Chris Curry, which is the pensions dashboard program, and this is really looking to directly address that issue Stuart was raising, that people don't know what pension they have. If you've moved around, you've moved employment, then you could have lots of little pots, and bringing all that together into one place to see, well, what am I actually going to get when I retire, will hopefully help people to make better financial decisions, to understand how much pension and how much money they're going to have in retirement. And one of the issues it's looking to address is that the industry thinks there's £26 billion of lost pots. So Stuart's saying there's not enough money for people to retire, and we know that there's around £26 billion worth of pension sat there unclaimed because the providers of that pension don't know where the individual is. So one of the things they're hoping the dashboard will do is to link people back up with their pension. Now, we've mentioned the potential change of government. It does have cross-party support, so it's not going away. And other countries have already implemented these things as well. But fundamentally, what is it? It's just a website or an app that you can log into and find information about your pension. So how does this actually work? So as an individual, you will log into the dashboard, and that starts this concept of a finder service. So that's where it then goes and finds your pension. So it uses some of your personal information, and it looks across every single pension scheme in the land. So that's public schemes, private schemes, state pension, and then says, okay, where does this individual have a pension? When it finds it, you get this positive return, and it says, great, I found you 3 pensions. At that point, it goes off to those people who provide the pension and get some more information about the pension, and then you can view all of that in one place. So at the very, very end, you can sort of view information about those 3 pension pots that have been found. But there isn't going to just be one dashboard. So as Stuart's talking, we're talking about this concept of a pensions dashboard, but the proposal is for there not to be just one dashboard. There could be lots of them. So the Money and Pensions Advisory Service MAPS, they will have a dashboard, but big insurance providers and the like. So when you might have a personal pension that you're logging into Aviva's website, when you log in, you might be able to see all your other pensions at the same time. And it's not a big database. So whenever you talk about big government IT projects, it does sort of set some alarm bells off. So the government, when they were deciding how should dashboards work, so what we don't want to do is have a big government database that's got everybody's pension details in and it gets searched. So instead, what happens is anytime any individual logs in to look for their pension, a message gets sent to every single pension scheme, regardless of whether you've got 100 members or 1 million members, to say, do you have a pension for this individual? And that's every time they log in. So that's millions of requests potentially going out to every pension scheme in the land to go and search their data to avoid this concept of having all of the data in one place. And it's quite a big challenge for the industry. So what did the industry do? If you look at the next slide, what the industry did was set up a load of big databases. So we've got about 6 or 7 of them. So these company pensions technology firms have set up things called ISPs. So pension schemes, so as employers, you will give your data to the pension scheme. The pension scheme will then hand it over to one of these ISPs, and they will then deal with all of these millions of searches coming in every night, and will attempt to match the individual who's logged into the pensions dashboard or one of the pensions dashboards to their data. And there's a couple of challenges, and we will talk about this later about what it means having multiple dashboards to members. All this data moving around do bring some challenges that we'll discuss later. On the next couple of slides, I've got an example dashboard. I can't show you the real dashboard because the real dashboard doesn't actually exist yet. The technology is still being built, and we'll look at the timeline when I get onto when it will happen. But this is an example of Money Hub. So if you do a search online for Money Hub and sample dashboard, you can go and have a little play with this yourself. And this shows a concept of how they think dashboards will work. So the bit that's not being shown here is there will be a login, and the dashboard has this concept of a secure login where you will be logged in and it will know it's you. And on the next page, it will confirm the member's identity. So you see it's got first name, last name, date of birth, and address. And the individual can't change that. They've been verified using another government big database somewhere to show that they are definitely right for this individual. So the idea is we can trust those for finding pensions. And then there's some free type information at the bottom of that page where they can provide their email address, mobile number, or national insurance number, but they're all typed in by the individual, and these things can be used then to go off and find the pension. And then they click find, and you go on to the next page, and for this individual, great, they found 7 pensions. So it's taken those details, both the ones they've typed in by hand and the ones that were confirmed, searched every pension in the land, and found 7 that matched the individual. And there's a bit of an explanation about what they're about to see. If you go on to the next slide, they can then see, and this is really the crux of what the dashboard's trying to get at, is that there were 7 pension pots, and they might have forgotten about some of them. And that from age 67, which is the state pension age for this person, they're expected to get an income of £2,300 a month. Now, it might not look like this. This is an example dashboard. I really like this approach. So this ties directly back into what Stuart was talking about, the work that the PLSA have done around living standards. So they're estimating for this individual, they will get between a moderate and comfortable level of retirement. If it does end up being displayed in this way, it can be a very powerful tool for getting individuals to understand what their retirement or the quality of life in retirement will be, and hopefully invest more in their pension. And finally, if you look at the timeline, this was just another example. So I think one of the challenges with all of these things is as much as we want to make pensions simple, as you said, that they not necessarily are. Your state pension age can be very different to the age at which your other pensions come into payment, and you can have different pensions coming into payment at different times. And what this is just mapping is how elements of a person's pension may come in over time, just so that the individual understands that. So that's what the dashboard is. So the dashboard is this tool to get to hopefully help people understand their pension better. Hopefully it will look something like some of the examples, and people will tie into some of the good work done by Pensions Dividend Standards Authority around quality of life as well. And talk a little bit about data because it impacts on employers as well as pension schemes. If you look at the next slide, so the data is really in two parts. We have the find data. This is data used to locate the benefits. So this is key. If this is wrong, individuals won't find their pension scheme. And it can be wrong in two ways. It can either be wrong because the pensions administrator holds the wrong data, or it could be wrong because it's been entered wrong at the start. So things like the NI number. So the bits in green on the top, those are the only bits that we can trust. We being the pension scheme trying to match it to a pension. And the bits in blue are being provided by the individuals on the bottom. So this information will be used to say, yes, you do have a pension. On the next slide, we've got the view data. So once it's found, and in the example, we saw those 7 pensions, you then get all of this data back. And I'm not going to go through it all in individual detail, but it'll be things like, well, what type of pension this is? When did you start accruing this pension? So who's administrating the pension? So you can actually get in contact with them to find out more information. How do you find information? So links to websites about that bit of pension. Employer details. We'll talk about employer details a bit later. And pensions entitlement. And the bit in red, probably the most, I suspect, the bit most people will be interested in, which is the figures. What am I actually going to get at retirement? But the figures are not, pension schemes don't have to provide the figures. This will be quite an interesting one. So you could log in, and not all of those 7 pension schemes will provide figures. Once the member logs in, the pension scheme has 10 working days to put the figures onto the dashboard. So they do have to put them on if they haven't put them out before. But of course, if somebody's logged in to see what is their income going to be at retirement, and it's only half complete because half the pension schemes haven't bothered doing it, then faith, I suspect, in the quality of the dashboard will go away. Are they actually going to log back in 3 days when the first pension scheme provides the figure and 5 days when the second does, or will they just walk away because it didn't have all the information they required? So when is all this happening? So there was, if any of you have been paying attention to the pensions dashboard, the pensions dashboard has been talked about for a long, long time. We're definitely pre-COVID, when I was attending webinars on will dashboard ever happen? And there was some original legislation and an original timeline, which had planned in December 2022, the dashboard technology would go live. And then in April 2023, schemes would start staging. What staging means is connecting up to the dashboard so they could be searched. And it's done in a order of scheme size. So if you're in the LGPS, then you're likely to be very early on in the staging timeline. If you've got a pension scheme with only a couple of hundred members, you'll be right at the end of the staging window. And only schemes with 100 employees contributing or 100 employees and ex-employees who still haven't taken their pension combined have to connect to the dashboard. So if you have less than 100, then you don't have to connect at all. That's the wave 3 staging in the original timeline. You can voluntarily choose to connect, but if you're less than 100 members, there is no legal requirement to connect. And the really key point on that original staging point was in April this year, we were supposed to hit DAP, which is the dashboard availability point. So that's the point the dashboard gets released to the public, so the public can actually start using the dashboard. Now, in the original timeline, that was before all of the schemes had actually connected to the dashboard, and that could bring some interesting challenges for employers, which we'll come on to shortly. In the revised timeline, so we're on a revised timeline because it's a government IT project and the technology did not work. So when they came to ZEM22, unfortunately, they couldn't connect schemes, didn't work, so it all got delayed. The legislation then, so there was an amendment to the legislation, And the new legislation doesn't set out requirements for staging anymore. It has this fixed deadline of October 2026. All schemes of that above 100 members will have to be connected. So that is set out in law. So unless something happens to change that, that is the connection deadline. They are currently testing the connection and the technology again. It's either this month or next month the testing restarts. So assuming that all does go okay this time, the new plan is for the larger schemes, the LGPSs and the like, to start staging in June next year. In July, they're going to start giving savers. Savers is the pensions dashboard terminology where I've been using members. They use savers. They're going to start allowing some schemes to access in July. And then at some point between July 25 and October 26, it is highly likely the dashboard will be made available to the public. But nobody knows where that date is. The government don't know what it is. We don't know what it is yet. That is a date to be defined. But
have we lost sound on Chris? Sorry.
Yeah, I can't hear Chris either.
Bear with us, folks.
can you hear me now?
There you go.
Perfect. And the IT couldn't hold up to the entire presentation. Right. So with that little break, how is this actually going to impact schemes and how will it impact employers? And there are four key areas that you will need to address. Data, as with any big pension project, data is going to be a challenge. How you communicate with your employees, how pension schemes communicate with all of their members brings challenges. If your scheme allows additional voluntary contributions, and this is going to cost money. So if we look at the data challenges, there's some stat. I was speaking to a tracing agency on Monday, and they're saying around 20% of the data they trace is invalid. So that's there's date of births that are wrong because they were entered wrong when they were typed into the system right at the start. People's move address, they change surname, they don't update their pension scheme. So a lot of data is just wrong. And this is a challenge when you're trying to match those members to their pension. You might be currently sending your pension scheme an annual data cut. That's quite usual for benefit statements to say these are the people's addresses and all those sort of things. But people are now logging in on a daily basis to access this. So you may need to be more frequently updating data than is before. We know data degrades as it changes between administrators and systems. It gets transposed to American dates and all of these sort of things. So data degradation will be a problem. Missing data. So we said there is employer information going to be coming through to the dashboard, but pension schemes don't typically keep employer information up to date because we don't use it for anything, and therefore, this is entirely possible. You've rebranded, you've changed the name, but the name against the pension scheme is different, and therefore that can lead to confusion. And a lot of pension schemes aren't set up for calculations for a number of reasons. Data quality isn't good enough, they're too complex. The membership profile means that they're not having to do annual calculations for most of the members. So calculations will be a challenge as well. In terms of communication piece, I think this is going to affect employers just as hard as it will on pension schemes. There are a few issues here. The dashboard availability point. We don't know when this is going out to the public. We do know that LGPS are likely to be there before that dashboard availability point. But if you've got multiple schemes where you've got another scheme that some employees are a member of. The profile of companies across Wales, if people have moved a lot, there tends to be a lot of smaller employers in Wales. It is highly likely your employees will go on and be able to use the dashboard before all of their pensions are there. So how do we make this a good tool when they're going to log in and the whole point is to see all their pension and not all their pensions will be there? Fraud is going to be a really interesting challenge because there isn't just one dashboard. The potential for fraudster phishing attempts on dashboard, I think, is going to be really, really high. So I suspect you already do some form of fraud and phishing training with your staff to protect the data that you're responsible for. But highlighting these sort of issues to employees and just the people in general, that you will go out and you will engage with your clients, your own members, because fraud is going to be a challenge. And obviously, we all need to support vulnerable members. Pensions, transfer fraud, and other forms of pension fraud are a big issue for the industry. And this is just another way that malicious actors will try and target vulnerable members to try and get access to their benefits. So we all, and that's employers and people who administer pension schemes, do need to get on top of communication, make sure members know what the dashboard is, they understand what they're being shown, and they understand the potential for fraud. And the other thing I'm not going to spend too long on, and charges AVCs. This all will cost money if you've got to be sending data to pension schemes more often. There's going to be more queries. You're going to have to deal with more questions, I suspect, from your employees. Some charges will impact on employers just as well on pension schemes. There are costs for having to deal with all of these millions of requests. AVC is an interesting area. If you do offer your staff the ability to pay into an AVC provider, it's worth understanding how that's going to be displayed on the dashboard, because it can be done in a number of different ways. So you can link that additional pot that they're building up to their main pot if it's done properly. If it's not, a member could log in and go, well, I should only have one pension, but I got two and I don't understand where on earth this other pension's come from. And so it's worth understanding, if you do allow members to make additional contributions, just how that is going to work, how it's going to be presented on the dashboard. But bearing in mind, be a little bit nice to your providers, because they've not seen the dashboard because it's not actually out there yet either. So this is still an area that's being worked on in industry. So just to summarize, just the whistle-stop tour of what the dashboard is. So it is coming in October 2026, or at least that's when everybody has to connect. But the availability point means you might be able to use it sooner than that. It is just a website or an app that you can log in and find all your pension. And tying back to Stuart's point, this is about good financial well-being and trying to engage people more with their pension, to find their pensions and hopefully save more for retirement. There's some work to do for employers around comms, working with your pension scheme provider, but to make your employees aware of what's coming in, will come in, and what they see and what they won't. You might need to do some work on your data and making sure that you are letting your scheme know about changing address, changing the name, all these sort of things more frequently than before. And it's not going away if the government changes, because there is cross-party support across Parliament for this. I think at this point then, so with questions.
Thanks both. That's really, really informative, and yeah, I'm Googling where I've got pensions as we speak. Any questions from anybody? There's nothing that I can see in the chat at the minute, but I've got one for you both on the pensions dashboards, if that's okay. I don't know if you're aware, are there any plans for kind of government resources to support the communications and maybe kind of a behaviour change scheme throughout this?
So the the pensions dashboard program, they are, and the pensions regulator are planning to do a big media campaign before the launch dashboard. So the intention in the latest round, they said they would give industry at least 6 months notice for this dashboard availability point, and then there will be a big campaign in the press, on TV, to make people aware of what is coming. The pensions regulator, they had drafted some communication, but it all got scrapped when they sort of re-kicked off the project. But they are creating material that can be used for employers to give out to employees. Yes. So the pensions regulator and the pensions dashboard program, they've got websites and there is resources on there, but that communication journey hasn't been finalized yet because they don't know when it's actually going to go out to the public.
Yeah.
But they are intending to do a big public media campaign on this to raise awareness.
I can see if there's a question there from another Louise. I'll start with the first one. So if auto enrolment went from 8 to 12%, is the cost borne by employee or organisation or still unknown? So I think that one's for you, Stuart.
Yeah, so currently, obviously, it's 3% from the employer and 5% from the employee. So it's still unknown, but what the sounds I've been hearing is people saying 6% sort of each, but obviously that would mean the employer rate does it by 3 and the employee only by 1, or maybe 5 for the employer and 7 for the employee. So they both go up by maybe 2% from where they are really, but we don't know yet. But I think again, it would be shared some way, I think, between both the employer and the employee.
Thank you. And then there's another question in there from Louise as well. If a provider has gone under, does the pension disappear? Although I imagine they're despairing as well, Louise.
So if it's a defined benefit scheme, then the pension doesn't disappear. But what happens is that it goes into the pension protection fund, and you get 90% of your earnings. Other types of defined contribution schemes, the pension can't disappear. That money you've set aside is yours. It's not the pension providers. So I assume the questions in relation to that, unless Chris it's maybe in relation to the dashboard as well. I don't know.
Even if the scheme does go into the PPF, if it's after a certain point, it will still be connected to the dashboard anyway. And then ultimately, if the provider collapses and the DB pension scheme goes with it and moves into the PPF, you will still be able to find that when it's ultimately in the PPF, and sort of when it does transfer in.
Fab, that's great. And we've got a question from Jane as well. Are there any actions that we should be looking at now as an employer, such as checking the data integrity, or do we wait for further information?
I think it's a really interesting question. The onus is usually on the pension scheme to do it, because the employer only has part of the record. So you've got the people currently paying, but usually there's a big cohort of people who used to be in employment, have left employment, but still have that pension benefit. So it's usually run across the membership as exercise. That said, if you are only providing an annual data cut, you probably want to be having discussions about how can you efficiently give that data to the pension scheme, because sometimes the renewal loads can be quite time consuming, quite manual. And if you are going to need to be doing that on a monthly basis now or an annual, you might want to start having those conversations about how can you update the pension scheme on changes more quickly than potentially you're doing now.
Great, thanks, Chris. Are there any further questions? I think it's been a really informative session, both, and I think one of the thoughts that I've had as well is around what the role of the board might be in some of this as well, across the boards across our membership, and actually communicating some of that out as well. And I think there might be a bit of a further discussion for us to have as well, because I think that'd be a really interesting one. If there aren't any further questions, it just leaves me to say thank you so much all for coming so much all for coming along. I know everyone's got really busy schedules at the minute, so it's really appreciated kind of coming along to this. And thank you so much to our commercial partners and Stuart and Chris for delivering a really informative session. And as somebody who is not a finance professional, I understood what was going on, so I really appreciate that as well. That's really great. We do look forward to seeing you all soon. If you've got any kind of requests for any sessions that you'd like to see, run for your community, run for your organisation, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, to get in touch with the team, and we will be sharing the slides and a link to this recording afterwards as well. So I know if you'd like to kind of share that with some of your colleagues as well, that resource will be there and be available. It'll also be uploaded onto our Housing Hub too. If there's nothing else, thank you very much.